The wind screamed across the Wyoming plains like something alive and angry, and Zelda Vaughn knew she was going to die out here in the white emptiness if she did not find shelter soon. It was November of 1883, and the blizzard had descended without warning while she traveled from Fort Laramie to Black Hawk, a journey that should have taken 2 days in fair weather. Her father had sent her ahead with a wagon driver who was supposed to deliver supplies to their general store, but the man had fallen ill that morning with terrible stomach pains. Against his protests, Zelda had insisted on continuing alone, confident in her ability to follow the well-worn trail. She had lived her entire 21 years in the Wyoming Territory, but always within the protective walls of her father's store or the confines of their small home. Her mother had died when she was 7, and her father had become fiercely protective, keeping her close, teaching her to read and write and keep accounts, but never allowing her to venture far or learn the harder skills needed to survive in this unforgiving land. Now, as the snow whipped around her so thick she could barely see her horse's ears, she understood what a foolish, sheltered girl she had been. The cold cut through her wool coat like it was made of paper, and her fingers had gone numb on the reins an hour ago. She had lost the trail when the whiteout began, and now she was simply letting the horse choose the direction, praying the animal had better instincts than she did. The horse stumbled, and Zelda lurched forward, nearly losing her seat. Her vision was blurring from the cold and the endless assault of white. She could not feel her feet in the stirrups anymore. The world had become nothing but howling wind and stinging snow, and she knew with a clarity that cut deeper than the cold that she had made a terrible mistake. Her father would be devastated. He had one child, one reason to keep going after her mother's death, and she had thrown her life away out of stubborn pride and ignorance. She tried to pray, but her thoughts were scattering like the snow. The horse stopped moving, and she did not have the strength to urge it forward. She slumped in the saddle, feeling the cold seeping into her bones, turning her sluggish and heavy. Sleep seemed like a mercy. She let her eyes close. A hand grabbed her arm, and she jerked awake with a gasp. Through the white chaos, a face appeared, barely visible beneath a snow-crusted hat. A man, his features harsh and weathered, his eyes sharp despite the storm. "You cannot sleep," he shouted over the wind. "Come on, we need to move now." She tried to respond, but her lips would not form words. The man did not wait for an answer. He pulled her from the saddle with surprising strength, catching her when her frozen legs could not support her weight. He grabbed her horse's reins with his other hand and began moving, half carrying her through the blinding snow. Zelda had no idea how long they walked. It felt like hours, though it might have been only minutes. The world narrowed to the man's iron grip on her arm and the struggle to keep her feet moving. Just when she thought she could not take another step, a dark shape emerged from the white, a small cabin, its outline barely visible. The man pushed the door open and pulled her inside, then went back for the horses. Zelda collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking violently. The cabin was dark and cold, but it blocked the wind, and that alone felt like salvation. She heard the man outside, then the sound of horses being led away, probably to a lean-to or small barn. A few minutes later, he returned, slamming the door behind him and dropping a bar across it to keep it shut against the wind. He moved around the cabin with practiced efficiency, and soon she heard the strike of a match. A lantern flared to life, casting warm light across the small space. The man knelt by a small stove and began building a fire, his movements quick and sure. Within minutes, flames were crackling behind the iron grate, and warmth began to seep into the room. Only then did the man turn to look at her fully. He was older than she had first thought, probably near 30, with dark hair plastered to his head from the snow and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His eyes were a startling blue-green, the color of a mountain lake, and they studied her with an intensity that made her heart skip despite her exhaustion. "Can you move?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. She tried to stand and failed. Her legs were still not working properly. He crossed to her in 2 long strides and lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to a narrow bed against one wall. He set her down and immediately began pulling off her gloves. His hands were warm, and she gasped at the contrast against her frozen fingers. "This is going to hurt," he warned. He was right. As circulation returned to her hands and feet, the pain was excruciating, like being stabbed with 1,000 hot needles. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears streamed down her face. The man disappeared and returned with a blanket, which he wrapped around her shoulders. Then he went back to the stove and hung a pot of snow over the heat. "My name is Quinn Jameson," he said, not looking at her. "This is my lying cabin. I was checking on cattle when the storm hit. You are lucky I decided to head back when I did." "Thank you," Zelda managed through chattering teeth. "I am Zelda Vaughn. I was traveling to Black Hawk, alone." His tone suggested what he thought of that decision. "The driver fell ill. I thought I could manage. You thought wrong." He glanced at her, and his expression softened slightly. "But you are alive, and that is what matters. This storm is going to last through the night, maybe into tomorrow. We are stuck here until it passes." The reality of the situation hit her then. She was alone in a cabin with a strange man, stranded by a blizzard. Her father had always warned her about such situations, about how quickly a woman's reputation could be destroyed. But what choice did she have? Without Quinn Jameson, she would be dead in a snowbank right now. As if reading her thoughts, Quinn said, "You will be safe here. I am not the kind of man who takes advantage." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, but she heard the steel beneath it, a code of honor that meant something. "I did not think you were," she said, though in truth she had not thought anything yet. Her mind was still catching up to the fact that she was alive. Quinn poured the melted snow water into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Drink this slowly. Your body needs to warm up from the inside." She took the cup with trembling hands and sipped. The water was barely warm, but it felt like a gift. Quinn returned to the stove and began rummaging through supplies stored in crates along the wall. He produced coffee, beans, and a few strips of dried meat. "It is not much, but it will keep us going," he said. As he prepared a simple meal, Zelda looked around the cabin. It was sparse but well-maintained, with a sleeping area, the small stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and shelves holding basic supplies. A rifle hung above the door, and saddles and tack were stored in one corner. This was a working cabin, used by ranch hands during cattle drives or when checking on herds in the far pastures. "You work for one of the ranches?" she asked. "The Triple J, about 8 miles east of here." "I have been with them for 5 years, since I came up from Colorado." He poured coffee into 2 cups and brought one to her. "What about you? What is in Black Hawk?" "My father. He owns the general store there. I was helping him manage the store in Fort Laramie, but he needed me in Black Hawk for the winter season." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "He is going to be so worried. He told me not to travel if the weather looked uncertain." The storm came up fast. Even experienced travelers got caught. Quinn sat in one of the chairs, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "We will get word to him as soon as the weather clears." They fell into silence, broken only by the howling wind outside and the crackle of the fire. Zelda studied Quinn when she thought he was not looking. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all sharp angles and lean muscle, the kind of man who had been shaped by hard work and harder weather. There was something about him that felt solid, dependable, like the mountains themselves. "Why did you come out here?" she asked suddenly. "To Wyoming, I mean, from Colorado." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee. "Needed a fresh start. My family had a ranch down there, but we lost it in a bad winter. My father drank himself to death, and my mother followed him a year later, just gave up. I did not want to stay in a place with so many ghosts. I am sorry." The words felt inadequate, but she meant them. He shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I made my peace with it." He looked at her directly then, and she felt the weight of his gaze. "What about you? You seem like someone who has not seen much of the world outside her father's store." She felt her cheeks flush, whether from the warmth of the cabin or embarrassment she could not tell. "Is it that obvious? You rode out into a Wyoming November alone. That tells me you do not know what you do not know." He said it without judgment, just stating a fact. "You are right," she admitted. "My father kept me close after my mother died. He meant well, but he taught me books and numbers, not how to survive out here. I can calculate profit margins and order inventory, but I cannot track a trail or build a fire or any of the things that actually matter in this place." "Those things matter too," Quinn said, "just in different ways. But out here you need both kinds of knowledge." He stood and checked the pot of beans on the stove. "You will learn if you want to, or you will go back east where life is easier." "I do not want to go east. This is my home." She said it with more vehemence than she intended. "I just want to be more than what I am, more than a shopkeeper's daughter who does not know anything real." Quinn looked at her with what might have been respect. "Then you will learn. The land teaches everyone eventually, one way or another." He dished out beans and meat onto 2 tin plates and handed her one. They ate in companionable silence, and Zelda felt warmth spreading through her body, not just from the fire and food but from something else, a sense of safety she had not expected to find with a stranger in a storm. After they finished eating, Quinn cleaned the dishes and stoked the fire. "You should sleep," he said. "You need to recover from the cold. I will keep the fire going." "Where will you sleep?" "I will take the floor. I have slept in worse places." "That hardly seems fair. You saved my life." "Which is exactly why I will sleep on the floor. You need the bed more than I do." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. Zelda was too exhausted to argue. She lay down on the bed, still wrapped in the blanket, and closed her eyes. She expected to fall asleep immediately, but instead she found herself listening to Quinn moving around the cabin, the solid, reassuring sounds of another person nearby. She heard him settle onto the floor near the stove, heard his breathing slow and deepen. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin walls, but inside it was warm and safe. She had been so close to death just hours ago, and now she was alive because of the man sleeping on the floor. She thought about what he had said about needing a fresh start, about losing everything. There was a strength in him that came from surviving loss, from building something new from ruins. She must have slept eventually, because when she opened her eyes again, pale light was filtering through the cabin's single small window. The storm was still raging outside, the wind still screaming, but it seemed less intense than the night before. Quinn was already awake, adding wood to the fire and setting more snow to melt. "Good morning," he said when he noticed her stirring. "Storm should break by afternoon if the signs are right." Zelda sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. "How can you tell? Wind is shifting, coming from the west now instead of north. That usually means the worst has passed." He poured coffee and brought it to her. "How do you feel?" "Sore, stiff, but alive thanks to you." "Good." He turned back to the stove. "I am going to check on the horses, make sure they weathered the night. You stay inside where it is warm." He pulled on his heavy coat and wrapped a scarf around his face, then pushed out into the storm. The blast of cold air that came through the door made Zelda shiver despite the fire. She could not imagine going back out into that white hell, but Quinn did it without hesitation. He was gone for perhaps 20 minutes, and when he returned, snow covered him from head to boot. He shook it off outside before coming in and barring the door again. Horses are fine. Ate some grain and look ready to travel when the weather allows. He shed his coat and hung it on a peg to dry. I brought in more wood. We will need it if the storm lasts longer than expected. You think it might? Always plan for the worst out here. Then you are ready when it happens. They shared another simple meal of coffee and cornmeal mush, and then the long wait began. The cabin felt smaller in the daylight, the space between them more noticeable. Zelda found herself acutely aware of Quinn's presence, the way he moved with economic grace, the quiet competence in everything he did. "Tell me about the Triple J," she said, more to break the silence than from real curiosity. Quinn leaned back in his chair. "It is a good operation. The owner, Jack McAllister, runs about 3,000 head of cattle across 15,000 acres. He treats his men fair, pays on time, does not ask for more than honest work. I have been a ranch hand there since I arrived, but Jack has been talking about making me foreman. The current one is getting old, wants to retire to town. That is a big responsibility. It is, but I am ready for it. I know cattle, I know the land, and I know how to handle men." He glanced at her. "What about you? Will you stay in Black Hawk, or is there something else you want?" It was a simple question, but it struck something deep in Zelda. What did she want? She had never really asked herself that. Her life had been laid out for her, working in her father's store, eventually marrying some local man her father approved of, probably taking over the store when her father got too old. It was a safe life, a predictable life. But was it what she wanted? "I do not know," she said honestly. "I never thought I had a choice. My father needs me, and I am all he has. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to do something different, to see more of the world, to be someone other than the shopkeeper's sheltered daughter." "You can be whoever you want to be," Quinn said. "It just takes courage to make the choice." "Is that what you did when you left Colorado?" "Yes. I could have stayed, found work on someone else's ranch, lived in my family's shadow, but I wanted something that was mine, built by my own hands, so I left." He met her eyes. It was not easy, but it was right. They talked through the morning, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Zelda found herself opening up to Quinn in a way she never had with anyone else. Maybe it was the isolation of the storm, the sense that they were the only two people in the world, or maybe it was something about Quinn himself, the way he listened without judgment, the way he seemed to see her as she was, not as the fragile girl her father saw. Quinn told her about growing up on a ranch, about learning to rope and ride before he could read, about the hard years after his parents died when he drifted from job to job, slowly building a reputation as a reliable hand. He told her about the beauty of the high country, about nights under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt, about the satisfaction of honest work well done. In turn, Zelda told him about her mother, about the hole her death had left, about her father's well-meaning but suffocating protection. She told him about the books she loved to read, stories of adventure and far-off places, and how sometimes she felt like her life was too small, too safe, too predetermined. "Safety is not a bad thing," Quinn said, "but it can become a cage if you let it." As afternoon approached, the wind began to die down. The howling reduced to a steady moan, then to occasional gusts. Quinn went to the window and looked out. "Storm is breaking. We will be able to leave in an hour or two once I can see well enough to find the trail." Zelda should have felt relief, but instead she felt something like regret. In this cabin, cut off from the world, She had found something she had not known she was missing. Here, with Quinn, she felt seen in a way she never had before. Going back to Black Hawk meant going back to being her father's protected daughter, back to a life that suddenly felt too small. But she had no choice. Her father would be frantic with worry. She owed it to him to return safely. Quinn prepared the horses, saddling both and loading what supplies he had brought. Zelda watched him work, memorizing the way he moved, the sure confidence in his hands. She did not know when she would see him again, or if she would. Black Hawk and the Triple J were not far apart by distance, but they were different worlds, his of cattle and open range, hers of ledgers and counters. When everything was ready, Quinn helped her mount. Her body protested, still sore from the cold and the ride before, but she gritted her teeth and settled into the saddle. Quinn mounted his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding, and took the lead rope of her horse. "Stay close," he said. "The snow is deep, and there might be drifts." They set out into a world transformed. The storm had left everything buried in white, the landscape unrecognizable. But Quinn seemed to know exactly where he was going, following landmarks Zelda could not see. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, sending shafts of light through the thinning cover. The journey to Black Hawk took 3 hours, slow going through the deep snow. Quinn did not push the pace, letting the horses pick their way carefully. They did not talk much, both focused on the journey, but Zelda felt connected to him anyway, a bond forged in the crucible of the storm. When the buildings of Black Hawk finally came into view, Zelda felt her heart sink. This was the end. Quinn would deliver her to her father, and they would go back to their separate lives. She would probably see him occasionally when he came to town for supplies, but it would not be the same. They would be strangers again. Quinn led her straight to the general store, a sturdy building with Vaughn Mercantile painted on the front. Before they reached the door, it flew open and her father rushed out. "Zelda, thank God." Zachariah Vaughn was a lean man in his 50s, his hair more gray than brown, his face lined with worry that deepened when he saw his daughter. He pulled her from the saddle into a crushing embrace. "I thought I had lost you." "When the driver arrived alone and said you had gone on and then the storm came, I thought you were dead." "I am fine, Papa. This man saved me. Quinn Jameson, this is my father, Zachariah Vaughn." Zachariah turned to Quinn and there were tears in his eyes. "How can I ever thank you? You brought my daughter back to me." "No thanks needed, sir. I did what anyone would do." Quinn touched the brim of his hat. "I should be getting back to the ranch." "Wait," Zelda said, suddenly desperate. "Please come inside, warm up before you ride back." Quinn looked at her and something passed between them, an understanding that this was not really about warming up. "Just for a minute," he said. Inside the store, Zachariah insisted on giving Quinn supplies, refusing to take payment. While her father filled a sack with coffee, bacon, and other goods, Zelda stood with Quinn by the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For saving me, for talking to me, for making me think about things I had never thought about before." "You are going to be fine, Zelda Vaughn," Quinn said. "You are stronger than you think. Will I see you again? I come to town sometimes for supplies. Maybe I will see you here." It was not a promise, not really, but it was something. Quinn took the sack from Zachariah, shook the older man's hand, and touched his hat to Zelda. Then he was gone, walking out into the snow-covered street and mounting his horse. Zelda watched through the window as he rode away, something in her chest aching like a wound. "He seems like a good man," her father said, coming to stand beside her. "He is. You care about him." It was not a question. Zelda looked at her father, this man who had spent years trying to protect her from the world, and decided to be honest. "Yes, I do." I know it is sudden, and I know you will think I am foolish, but in those hours in the storm, I felt like I saw what life could be. Something real and honest and brave." Zachariah was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was sad. "I've kept you too close, haven't I? I tried so hard to keep you safe after your mother died that I forgot to let you live. You did what you thought was right. But it was not enough. You are a woman now, not a child, and you need more than what I can give you in this store." He put his hand on her shoulder. "If this man makes you feel alive, then do not let him go. Life is too short and too hard to miss chances at happiness." Zelda looked at her father in surprise. "You mean that?" "I do. I have had my love, your mother. She was everything to me, and when she died, I thought I could keep you safe by keeping you close. But I see now that I was wrong. You have to find your own way, make your own choices." He smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "Even if it means letting you go." The next weeks passed in a blur of work and worry. Zelda threw herself into helping with the store, taking inventory, serving customers, managing orders. But her mind kept drifting to Quinn, to the cabin in the storm, to the way he had looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. She watched for him every time the door opened, hoping to see him come in for supplies. But the days turned into a week, then two, and he did not come. She told herself he was busy with ranch work, that the foreman position had probably come through and he had new responsibilities. But doubt crept in. Maybe she had imagined the connection between them. Maybe for him it had just been about keeping someone alive through a storm, nothing more. Then, 3 weeks after the blizzard, the door opened and Quinn walked in. He was dressed in clean clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved. He took off his hat when he saw her, and his eyes found hers across the store. "Miss Vaughn," he said, his voice formal but his eyes warm. "Mr. Jameson." Zelda set down the jar she had been dusting, her heart suddenly racing. "Can I help you with something?" "I need supplies," he said, but he did not move toward the shelves. Instead, he crossed to the counter where she stood. "But mostly I came to see you." "Oh." "I have been thinking about what you said, about wanting something more than what you have. I have been thinking about it a lot." He twisted his hat in his hands. "I am not good with words, Zelda, but I know what I feel. Those hours in the storm, talking to you, getting to know you, it meant something to me. You meant something to me." Zelda could barely breathe. "You meant something to me too. I am just a ranch hand. I do not have much to offer. But Jack gave me the foreman job, and it comes with a house, a small place but sturdy. I can provide for a wife, not luxuries maybe, but a good life, a real life." He met her eyes directly. "I know it is fast, and I know your father might object, but I would like to court you properly if you will let me." Before Zelda could answer, her father emerged from the back room. He must have heard Quinn's words because he came directly to the counter. "Mr. Jameson," he said. "You want to court my daughter?" Quinn straightened, facing Zachariah directly. "I do, sir. I know I am not wealthy or high-born, but I am honest and hard-working. I will treat her with respect and give her the best life I can." Zachariah studied Quinn for a long moment, and Zelda held her breath. Then her father smiled. "I think you are exactly what my daughter needs. You have my blessing to court her, and we will see where it leads." Over the following months, Quinn courted Zelda with a steadiness that made her fall more in love with him every day. He came to town every Sunday without fail, bringing her small gifts, wildflowers in summer, a perfectly smooth river stone, once a book of poetry he had traded 2 days' wages to obtain. They took walks together through Black Hawk, always properly chaperoned by her father or one of the town ladies. But somehow Quinn always managed to steal moments where they could talk privately. He told her more about his life on the ranch, about the cattle drives and the long days in the saddle, about the men he worked with and the land he loved. She told him about her dreams of travel, of seeing the ocean someday, of reading every book ever written. He listened like her words were important, like her dreams mattered. "I cannot give you the ocean," he said one day as they sat on a bench outside the store, "but I can give you wide skies and mountains that touch the clouds. I can give you a life where every day means something, where you will learn and grow and become whoever you want to be." "That sounds like everything I need," she said softly. By October, a year after the storm that had brought them together, Quinn asked her to marry him. They were at the Lying Cabin, the place where he had saved her life. He had brought her there with her father's permission to show her where they had met, inside the cabin. Little changed from that desperate night, Quinn took her hands in his. "This is where I found you," he said. "Where I almost lost you before I ever really knew you. I am not a man who believes in fate, but I cannot help thinking that storm happened for a reason, that it brought you to me." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "Zelda Vaughn, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a life that might be hard sometimes but will always be honest and full of love?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married in November of 1884, exactly 1 year after the storm, in the small church in Black Hawk. Zelda wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved by her father all these years. Quinn wore a new suit, the first he had ever owned, and when he looked at her walking down the aisle, his eyes shone with emotion. Zachariah gave his daughter away with tears and smiles in equal measure, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed Zelda with a tenderness that took her breath away. The reception was held at the store, with half the town in attendance. Jack McAllister came with his wife, congratulating Quinn on finding such a fine woman. The ranch hands who worked with Quinn celebrated with enthusiasm, clearly fond of their new foreman. Even some of the homesteaders who had recently settled near the Triple J came to wish them well. As the sun set and the party continued, Quinn pulled Zelda outside for a moment alone. They stood in the street where he had first delivered her to her father, and he wrapped his arms around her. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." She looked up at him. "Are you?" "More than I have words to say." He kissed her forehead. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making you glad you chose me. I will hold you to that promise." They moved into the foreman's house at the Triple J, a 2-room cabin with a good stove and solid walls. It was small compared to the space above her father's store where Zelda had grown up, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Zelda learned to cook on the wood stove, at first burning more meals than she served successfully, but Quinn ate everything with praise and patience. She learned to tend the vegetable garden behind the house, to preserve food for winter, to mend clothes and make soap. But Quinn also encouraged her other pursuits. He built her shelves for her books and bought her new ones whenever he could afford it. When she expressed interest in learning to ride properly, not just sit in a saddle but truly ride, he taught her with patience, taking her out on the range and showing her how to move with the horse, how to read the land, how to spot cattle. She learned to shoot, too, under his careful instruction. The first time she hit a target at 50 yards, Quinn whooped with pride and picked her up, spinning her around while she laughed. "You are not the same sheltered girl I found in that storm," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "No, I am not. I am the woman you helped me become." Life on the ranch was hard work, but it was also beautiful. Zelda saw sunrises that painted the sky gold and pink, saw storms roll across the plains like armies on the march, saw the cattle moving like a living river across the grasslands. She learned the rhythm of the seasons, the cycle of birth and death and rebirth that governed everything. She also learned about the darker side of ranch life. In the spring of 1885, a conflict broke out between the Triple J and a group of homesteaders who had settled along a creek that provided water for the cattle. The homesteaders, mostly families from back east trying to make a living on small farms, had fenced off access to the water. Jack McAllister rode out with Quinn and several other hands to negotiate, and for a tense few days, it looked like violence might erupt. Zelda went with them, at Quinn's side, and she saw the fear in the homesteaders' eyes, families with children who had staked everything on a dream just like Quinn had once done. She convinced Jack and Quinn to find a compromise, a schedule for water access that would work for both the ranch and the farmers. It was not a perfect solution, but it prevented bloodshed and built a fragile bridge between two ways of life. "You have a gift for seeing both sides," Quinn told her that night, "for finding the human in every situation. Maybe that is what my father's store taught me," she said. "Everyone who comes through that door has a story, a struggle. You cannot run a store in a small town without learning to see people." In December of 1885, Zelda realized she was carrying their first child. She told Quinn on a cold evening, the two of them sitting by the fire after a long day. He stared at her for a moment, then pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I am sure." He pulled back to look at her face, and there were tears on his cheeks. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father." Their son was born in August of 1886, a healthy baby with Quinn's dark hair and Zelda's gray eyes. They named him Zachary, after Zelda's father, and the old man cried when they told him. Little Zachary was a loud, energetic baby who rarely slept and demanded constant attention, but neither Quinn nor Zelda minded. They took turns walking him at night, exhausted but amazed by the tiny life they had created. Watching Quinn with their son, Zelda fell in love with him all over again. He was gentle and patient, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice to soothe the baby, carefully holding the small body against his broad chest. He made toys for Zachary, a rattle from a gourd and stones, a small wooden horse carved with painstaking detail. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and more chaotic with a baby, but deeply satisfying. Zelda continued to help with the ranch, bringing Zachary with her in a sling when she rode out to check on pastures or deliver messages. The baby seemed to love the movement, often falling asleep to the rocking gait of the horse. In the fall of 1887, tragedy struck the Triple J. A fire broke out in the main barn during a dry spell, and several ranch hands were injured fighting the blaze. Quinn worked for 2 days straight, helping to rebuild and care for the injured men. One of them, a young hand named Thomas, died from his burns, and the whole ranch grieved. The funeral was held in Black Hawk, and Zelda stood with Quinn as they buried a man barely 20 years old. She felt Quinn's pain, his sense of responsibility for the men under his care. That night he held her and Zachary close, whispering that life was too short, that every moment mattered. "We have to hold tight to what we have," he said. "Never take it for granted." In 1889, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with a loud cry and fierce determination. They named her Rose, and she was as different from Zachary as night from day. Where he was bold and adventurous, she was cautious and thoughtful. But both children were deeply loved, and they grew up surrounded by the beauty and harshness of the Wyoming territory. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Quinn became one of the most respected foremen in the territory, known for his fair treatment of men and his skill with cattle. Zelda became a bridge between the ranch and the growing community of homesteaders, using her skills from the store to help negotiate conflicts and build understanding. In 1890, Wyoming achieved statehood, and the territory Zelda had known all her life became part of something larger. The world was changing, railroads spreading, towns growing, the wild open spaces slowly being tamed. But on the Triple J, life continued much as it always had, governed by the needs of the cattle and the turn of the seasons. Zelda Vaughn grew older, his health declining, and in the winter of 1892 he fell ill with pneumonia. Zelda spent weeks at his bedside, Quinn managing everything at home so she could be with her father. On a cold February night with Zelda holding his hand, Zachariah passed peacefully. "He was a good man," Quinn said at the funeral. "He raised a remarkable daughter. He gave me the foundation," Zelda said, "but you helped me build on it." They sold the store, neither of them wanting to manage it from a distance, and used the money to buy land adjacent to the Triple J. With Jack's blessing, they started their own small ranch, running 100 head of cattle. It was hard work building something from nothing, but it was also exhilarating. They were creating something for their children, a legacy built with their own hands. One night in the spring of 1895, as they lay in bed in the house they had built together, Quinn turned to Zelda. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this life? You could have gone east, found an easier path." Zelda propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Do you remember that day in the lying cabin when you asked me what I wanted? I did not have an answer then, because I had never let myself imagine anything beyond what was expected. But you showed me that I could choose my own path, that I could be more than I thought possible. Why would I regret that? Because it has been hard. The work, the losses, the struggles. It has been hard," she agreed. "But it has also been real and honest and full of love, exactly what you promised me. I would not trade a single moment of it." He pulled her close, kissing her deeply. "I love you, Zelda Jameson. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "I love you too." In 1898, Zachary turned 12 and began working alongside his father in earnest, learning the skills he would need to run the ranch someday. Rose, at 9, showed a gift for numbers and organization that reminded everyone of her grandfather, and Zelda began teaching her the business side of ranching. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. On January 1, 1900, Quinn and Zelda stood with their children and watched the sunrise over the plains, marking not just a new year but a new era. They had survived blizzards and droughts, fires and conflicts, financial struggles and personal losses. Through it all, they had held tight to each other and the life they had built together. In the summer of 1903, Quinn was kicked by a horse and broke several ribs. For 2 weeks, he was bedridden, frustrated by his inability to work. Zelda ran the ranch with the help of Zachary, now 17 and already showing the strength and wisdom that would make him a fine rancher. When Quinn finally recovered, he found everything running smoothly, and he looked at his wife with new eyes. "You never needed me to show you how to be strong," he said. "You always had it in you. But you helped me find it," she said, "and that made all the difference." By 1905, the ranch was thriving, expanded to 300 head of cattle and 2 sections of land. Zachary had grown into a man, tall and capable, and the girls in town noticed. Rose, at 16, was beautiful and brilliant, already talking about attending the new state university in Laramie. One evening, as Quinn and Zelda sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset, Zachary approached with a young woman at his side. Her name was Emma, daughter of one of the homesteader families Zelda had helped years before, and it was clear from the way Zachary looked at her that this was serious. "We would like your blessing to marry," Zachary said. Quinn and Zelda exchanged glances, remembering their own beginning. You have it, Quinn said, but take your time. Make sure you are ready for the work that comes with loving someone. I am ready, Zachary said with the confidence of youth. We were ready too, Zelda said softly, and it was the best decision we ever made. They celebrated Zachary's wedding in the spring of 1906, a joyous occasion that brought together ranchers and homesteaders, old-timers and newcomers, all the threads of the community they had helped build. As Zelda watched her son marry the woman he loved, she thought about the scared girl lost in a blizzard 23 years ago, and she marveled at the distance she had traveled. That night, after the celebration, Quinn found Zelda standing alone, looking up at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About everything. About that storm, about the cabin, about how close I came to never having any of this." She leaned back against him. "About how one moment of fate can change everything." "It was not just fate," Quinn said. "It was choice. You chose to trust me in that storm. You chose to open your heart. You chose this life every day since then. We chose each other. We did. And I would choose you again every day for the rest of my life." They stood together under the stars, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful from it. The years had added lines to their faces and gray to their hair, but the connection between them was as strong as ever, forged in a blizzard and tempered by life. In 1910, Rose left for university, the first of their family to pursue higher education. It was hard to watch her go, but Zelda was proud beyond measure. Her daughter would have opportunities she had never had, would see and learn things beyond the Wyoming plains. Yet Rose promised to return, declaring she wanted to bring her education back to help the community. That same year, Zachary and Emma had their first child, a daughter they named Zelda after her grandmother. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Zelda cried happy tears, the circle of life turning again. Quinn, now nearing 60, began to slow down, though he would never admit it. He still rode out every day but came home earlier, more willing to let Zachary handle the hardest work. He spent more time with his granddaughter, teaching her songs and stories, carving her toys just as he had done for his own children. One autumn evening in 1915, as they sat together watching another sunset, Quinn took Zelda's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? For everything. For trusting me in that storm, for building this life with me. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to be grateful every single day." His voice was thick with emotion. "I was lost before I found you, Zelda. I did not even know it, but I was. You gave me purpose." Zelda squeezed his hand, her own eyes wet. "You gave me freedom. You taught me that I could be strong and capable and still be loved. You showed me what it means to be truly alive." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn gold and orange and purple, the same sky they had watched together for more than 30 years. The land stretched out before them, the ranch they had built, the legacy they were leaving for their children and grandchildren. In December of 1916, a blizzard struck, eerily similar to the one that had brought them together 33 years before. Quinn and Zelda sat in their warm house, safe and secure, and listened to the wind howl. "Do you remember?" Quinn asked. "Every moment," Zelda said. "I remember thinking I was going to die. I remember your hand grabbing my arm. I remember the cabin and the fire, and thinking that I had never felt so safe with a stranger. You told me you wanted something more than what you had, and you helped me find it." Quinn pulled her close. "There was a moment in that cabin when I was watching you sleep, when I realized I did not want to let you go. It terrified me. I had spent years protecting myself from caring too much, from risking my heart. But there you were, this brave, stubborn, beautiful woman, and I knew my life would never be the same. Mine was not, Zelda said. From that moment, everything changed. Everything became possible. The storm raged through the night, but they were warm and safe, surrounded by the life they had built together. In the morning, the world was white and clean, and Quinn and Zelda walked out into it hand in hand, their footprints the first to mark the fresh snow. By 1920, the ranch employed 15 hands and ran over 1,000 head of cattle. Zachary managed the day-to-day operations with skill and fairness that made his father proud. Rose had returned from university with a degree in education and opened a school for the children of ranchers and homesteaders, bringing learning to the community. She married a lawyer from Cheyenne and settled near the ranch, close to family. Quinn and Zelda, now in their late 50s, stepped back from the hardest work but remained active and involved. They had 4 grandchildren and another on the way. Their house was often full of family, of laughter and love and the chaos of children. On a warm summer evening in 1923, exactly 40 years after the storm that had brought them together, Quinn and Zelda returned to the Line cabin. It was still standing, still used occasionally by ranch hands, maintained and solid. They walked inside, and Zelda could almost see them there, younger versions of themselves, strangers huddled against a storm. "Right there is where you fell when I brought you in," Quinn said, pointing to the spot near the door. "I thought I might lose you before you even had a chance to warm up." "Right there is where you told me you would not take advantage," Zelda said, pointing to the stove. "And I believed you because I could hear the honor in your voice." "Right there is where we talked through the night," Quinn said, gesturing to the table. "And I started falling in love with you without even knowing it." They explored the small space, reliving memories, touching the walls that had sheltered them. Finally, they sat on the bed, the same narrow bed where Zelda had slept that first night. "I have been thinking about something you said," Quinn began. "Back then, during the storm, you said you felt like you had nothing, that you were just a shopkeeper's daughter who did not know anything real. I remember. And I told you that you would learn, that the land teaches everyone." He took her hand. "But what I did not say, what I did not know how to say then, was that you already had everything that mattered, courage and kindness and a heart brave enough to hope for more. That is what I saw in you, even then. Do you remember what you said when we were talking that night?" Zelda asked. "You told me you could be whoever you want to be, that it just takes courage to make the choice." "I did say that. You were right. I chose to be yours, and that choice made me everything else I became. A rancher's wife, a mother, a grandmother, someone strong enough to build a life in this hard, beautiful place." She touched his face gently. "You made me believe I could be more than I was." Quinn kissed her palm. "We made each other more than we were alone." They stayed in the cabin until sunset. 2 people who had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, who had built something lasting from a moment of crisis. As they rode home together through the golden light, Zelda thought about all the years stretching behind them, all the moments of joy and struggle, all the ways they had shaped each other and been shaped by the life they chose. The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons. Quinn's hair went fully white, and he moved more slowly, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Zelda never dimmed. Zelda herself aged gracefully, her strength evident in the way she carried herself, in the wisdom she shared with her grandchildren, in the way she still looked at Quinn with eyes full of love. In the winter of 1930, Quinn fell ill with pneumonia, the same illness that had taken Zelda's father. For weeks, he fought it, his strong constitution at war with his aging body. Zelda rarely left his side, holding his hand, talking to him, reminding him of all the reasons to keep fighting. One night, when he was at his worst, fever raging, Quinn opened his eyes and found Zelda beside him. "I am not ready to go yet," he said weakly. "There is still so much I want to say to you." "Then stay," Zelda said, tears streaming down her face. "Stay and say it all, we have time." And he did. Against the odds, Quinn pulled through, emerging from the illness weaker but alive. His recovery was slow, taking most of the spring, but by summer he was back on his feet, moving more carefully but determined to enjoy every day. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in November of 1934, a grand gathering at the ranch with family and friends from across the state. The governor of Wyoming came to honor them, presenting a proclamation recognizing their contributions to the state. The ranch hands, both current and former, threw a party that lasted 2 days. Zachary gave a speech about his parents' partnership, about how they had built something lasting through love and hard work. But the moment that meant most to Quinn and Zelda came late on the night of their anniversary, when everyone else had gone, and they stood alone under the stars. 50 years, Quinn said, his arm around Zelda's shoulders. "Half a century since I found you in that storm." "Since you saved me," Zelda corrected. "Since we saved each other." They stood in comfortable silence, looking at the same stars they had watched together for 5 decades. The ranch spread around them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to their work. "You remember what I said to you that first day?" Quinn asked. "When you said you had nothing. You said I had you." Zelda smiled at the memory. "And you were right. I had you, and that was everything." "It was not a promise I took lightly," Quinn said. "And I have tried every day since to make it true, to be worthy of what you gave up for me." "I gave up nothing," Zelda said firmly. "I gained everything. A life of meaning, a love that sustains me, a family that brings me joy." "I gained the world, Quinn. You gave me the world." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Even at 71, his eyes still held that intensity that had captured her in the storm 5 decades ago. "I love you, Zelda Jameson. I have loved you from that night in the cabin, and I will love you beyond my last breath. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are mine," she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "My storm cowboy who rode out of the snow to save me and stayed to love me." "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. The storm brought us together, but we chose to stay. That is what matters." As they walked back to their house, Zelda thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. She thought about the scared girl in the blizzard, the cowboy who had saved her, the love that had grown between them. She thought about all the ways they had built a life together, through hard work and harder times, through joy and sorrow, through choices made and paths taken. The story could have ended so differently. She could have died in that storm. They could have parted ways after the blizzard, never seeing each other again. She could have chosen safety over adventure, staying in her father's store instead of taking a chance on a cowboy with nothing but honor and dreams. But she had not. She had chosen love, and that choice had made all the difference. Quinn and Zelda lived together for many more years, watching their grandchildren grow and have children of their own, seeing the ranch expand and prosper, witnessing the world change around them while their love remained constant. They took long walks together every evening, weather permitting, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the partnership they had built over decades. In the spring of 1940, Quinn was thrown from a spooked horse. At 86, his bones were brittle, and the fall broke his hip. He recovered, but the injury aged him rapidly, leaving him unable to ride or work. It was a hard adjustment for a man who had spent his life in motion, but Zelda was there every step of the way, adapting their life to accommodate his limitations while never making him feel diminished. They spent more time in their home, which over the years had expanded from the simple two-room cabin to a comfortable house with modern conveniences. But Quinn's favorite spot remained the porch they had added years ago, where they could sit and watch the land they loved. One evening in October of 1945, as they sat together watching the sunset, Quinn took Zelda's hand. "I have been thinking about that storm," he said. It was a common starting point for conversations between them, that pivotal moment that had changed everything. "What about it?" Zelda asked. "About how it felt like the end of the world. The cold, the wind, the whiteness that swallowed everything. How close you came to dying." He squeezed her hand. "And how it turned out to be the beginning of everything good in my life. Mine too. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had not decided to head back to the cabin that day, if I had stayed out with the cattle or gone a different direction. You would have died in that storm, and I would never have known what I lost. But you did head back. You did find me. That is what matters." "Do you believe in fate?" Quinn asked. "That some things are meant to be?" Zelda considered the question. "I believe in choice more than fate. We could have parted after the storm. You could have delivered me to my father and ridden away. I could have been too afraid to let you court me. We chose each other again and again every day. That is more powerful than fate." "You are right," Quinn agreed. "But I am still grateful for the storm that brought you to me. And I am grateful for the cowboy who found me." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Two people, shaped by time and life and love, still finding joy in each other's presence after more than 60 years together. Quinn died peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1948, just shy of his 94th birthday. Zelda woke to find him beside her, his face calm, his hand still holding hers. She sat with him for a long time, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the man who had been her companion, her partner, her love for 63 years. The funeral was enormous, attended by hundreds of people whose lives Quinn had touched. Ranch hands he had mentored, homesteaders he had helped, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had been blessed by his presence. Zelda stood strong through it all, accepting condolences with grace, sharing stories of the man she had loved. But at night, alone in their bed, she allowed herself to grieve. The house felt too empty without him, the silence too loud. She missed his voice, his laugh, the way he had looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. She missed the weight of his hand in hers, the warmth of his body beside her, the steady presence that had been her anchor for so long. Zachary wanted her to move in with him and Emma, but Zelda refused. "This is the house we built together," she said. "This is where my memories live. I am not leaving." She continued to live in the ranch house, surrounded by family but maintaining her independence. She walked every evening, retracing the paths she and Quinn had taken together, talking to him as if he were still beside her. She found comfort in the land they had loved, in the sky that spread endless above her, in the steady rhythm of ranch life continuing around her. In the summer of 1950, Zelda returned to the lying cabin one last time. She was 87, her body frail but her mind still sharp. Rose drove her there, helping her make the journey she needed to make. Inside the cabin, little had changed. The same simple furniture, the same small stove, the same narrow bed. Zelda sat down slowly, her eyes drifting around the space, seeing ghosts. "This is where we met," she told Rose. "Your father rode out of a blizzard to save me, and we spent the night here talking. I fell in love with him in this room, though I did not have the words for it yet." "Tell me," Rose said, sitting beside her mother, and Zelda did. She told the whole story, from the terrifying storm to the moment Quinn had grabbed her arm, from their long night of conversation to the day he had proposed in this very cabin. She told it all, every detail she could remember, painting the picture of two young people finding each other against all odds. "He told me I was stronger than I thought," Zelda said. "And I told him I wanted to be more than I was. Together, we helped each other become those things." That is what love is, Rose. Not just attraction or affection, but partnership. Two people helping each other become their best selves. "You and Papa had something special," Rose said, tears in her eyes. "We did. But it was not magic or fate or luck. It was choice, every single day, choosing each other and choosing to work for what we wanted. The storm brought us together, but we built everything that came after." Zelda took her daughter's hand. "Remember that when life gets hard, love is not just a feeling. It is a commitment, a decision you make over and over." They stayed in the cabin for an hour, Zelda reliving memories while Rose listened. When they finally left, Zelda took one last look around, whispering a goodbye to the place where her life had truly begun. Zelda lived for 3 more years, surrounded by the love of her family, still sharp and engaged with the world around her. She saw her great-great-grandchildren born, held them in her arms, and told them stories of the old days, of blizzards and cowboys and a love that had lasted a lifetime. On a cold November night in 1953, exactly 70 years after the storm that had changed her life, Zelda Jameson passed away in her sleep. She was 90 years old, and she died in the house she had shared with Quinn, in the bed where they had slept side by side for 6 decades. The funeral was even larger than Quinn's had been, testament to the impact she had made on her community. Educators spoke of the school Rose had founded with her mother's support. Ranchers talked about her fairness and wisdom in settling disputes. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren shared stories of her kindness and strength. They buried her beside Quinn on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Wyoming sky they had both loved. The headstone was simple, bearing their names, their dates, and a single line Quinn had spoken to her during that first storm and repeated countless times over their years together. "You have me." The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, a thriving operation built on the foundation Quinn and Zelda had laid. The Line cabin remained standing, preserved by the family as a landmark, the place where it all began. Couples sometimes visited it, drawn by the story of two people who had found love in the midst of a storm and built something lasting from that moment. Years later, on the 70th anniversary of Quinn and Zelda's deaths, the family gathered at the Line cabin for a memorial. Dozens of descendants came, all tracing their lineage back to that night in 1883, when a cowboy had found a lost woman in a blizzard and chosen to save her life. The oldest of the gathered family, Zelda's great-great-granddaughter, stood before the group and told the story as it had been passed down through generations. She spoke of the storm, of Quinn riding through the white chaos to find Zelda frozen and lost. She spoke of the night they spent in the cabin, talking until dawn, discovering each other. She spoke of the love that had grown between them, tested by time and hardship but never broken. "They taught us what it means to build a life with someone," she said. "Not the easy parts, though there were those, but the hard work of loving someone every day, of choosing your partner over and over in good times and bad, of building something together that lasts beyond your own lifetime." As the family stood together in the cabin where it all began, a young couple among them held hands, their own wedding planned for the following spring. They looked around the small space and imagined it as it had been 70 years ago, a shelter from the storm, a place where two strangers had become something more. "I hope we have what they had," the young woman whispered. "We can," her fiancé said, "if we choose it the way they did." The story of Quinn and Zelda Jameson became part of the fabric of Wyoming history, told and retold, a reminder of what was possible when two people found each other against all odds. It was a story of rescue and survival, but more than that, it was a story of choice and commitment, of two people building a life and a love that endured. In the lying cabin on the Wyoming plains, where wind still howled and snow still fell in winter storms, the story lived on. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Quinn and Zelda Jameson walked together still, hand in hand, their love unbroken by death or time, eternal as the land they had loved and the family they had built. Their legacy was not just the ranch or the land or the descendants who carried their names. It was the example they had set, the proof that love built on mutual respect, honest partnership, and daily choice could weather any storm and create something beautiful and lasting. And on cold winter nights when blizzards swept across the plains, some swore they could see two figures riding together through the snow, a cowboy and the woman he had saved, still finding each other, still choosing each other, forever and always. The end.